Welcome back, everybody. Spring is not officially here yet, but daylight savings time has come or gone. I forget which one we're in, but we've got an extra hour of sunlight, so hope everybody's enjoying that. Speaking of sunlight, my guest today is Andy Storch. He is the author of a really great book called Own Your Career, Own Your Life. Really enjoyed reading this book. He's also a father of two. We talk about how you can apply the principles in this book to being a working parent, instilling a growth mindset in our kids, growing a personal brand, owning your career as a working parent, and much more. My name is Anthony Francis. You're listening to the Successful Working Parents podcast, where we talk to working parents about how they're able to balance it all and still thrive. If you enjoy this episode, please subscribe. Anyway, on to the show. Welcome back to the Successful Working Parents podcast, the podcast where we talk to successful working parents. The title is still pending. My guest today, he is the author of Own Your Career, Own Your Life. He's a speaker. He's a podcaster. He's a community builder, father of two. Ladies and gentlemen, Andy Storch. Andy, welcome to the show.
Anthony, thank you so much. I am excited to be here to talk about one of the hardest and best things in life, which is parenting.
Yeah, awesome. And I'm a big fan of yours. I've read your book. I've heard your podcast before we connected. So I'm excited to talk to you as well. I wanted to ask you first before we get into it. When you meet somebody at a party and they ask you, what do you do for a living? What do you say?
It's a hard question. I feel like I should have it down. I change it all the time depending on the audience, but generally, if they're not directly in my space, I'll say I'm an author and a speaker, primarily working with big companies to help them improve career development, leadership, things like that. Or I might say I work with organizations to help them improve engagement and retention by teaching their employees to do to own their careers and do the best work of their lives.
Oh, that sounds great. And tell us a little bit more about your role as a father. You have two kids, right?
Yes, I have two kids. They are 10 and 8, actually turning 11 and 9 next month. So they're kind of on the back end of that. And married for 21 years to my wife, Courtney. So we waited a little while before we had our kids. And it's been a fun learning journey with them for the last 10 years, especially as we've moved around. I've left corporate jobs to start my own business. We've done a lot of different big family adventures, and it's always been a big learning process.
And now you're living in Barcelona, right?
That's right. So I'm originally from Orlando, Florida, lived in California for a while. My daughter was actually born in San Francisco, and then we were back in Florida for most of their lives until about a year and a half ago. We decided to kind of uproot everything and move with two kids and a dog to Barcelona, Spain, primarily just to have an experience living outside the U.S., living in Europe, and giving a different experience to our kids as well.
Awesome. Well, like I said, I was a big fan of your book. I read it. I think I read it before I became a father or before I really just thought about what it was like being a working parent. I mean, my daughter's only 18 months old, so I'm still kind of processing what
Nice.
that actually means. But I really enjoyed it. The first sentence in the whole book is most careers happen by accident. And I feel like that's such a tough pill to swallow. And it's just so true, especially for me, right? Like most people just don't know what they wanted to do growing up. I'm always jealous when I do meet people that are like that. My wife was like that. She always knew she wanted to go into education. But I still, figure it out in a lot of ways. I think a lot of people are. How do you think we got there? And like, why is that the case?
Well, I think it's perfectly fine that most careers happen by accident because we don't always know what we want to be doing. We don't know what's out there. We don't know what exists. I always think it's funny how much almost kind of pressure we put on kids when people ask them, well, what do you want to do when you grow up? What do you want to be when they grow up? I'm like, I don't know. I don't even know what, most of the careers are. I still, every other day, I'm networking, talking to people, discovering new careers I didn't even know existed, right? Until I talk to them. So, and you may be certain early on. I mean, when I was young, 8, 10 years old, like my kids now, my dream was to be a professional baseball player. And that didn't quite work out. And then as I was going into college, I was really certain I wanted to be a civil engineer because I liked roads and bridges and things like that. And then I got to college and I did a little bit too much partying and I didn't make it through chemistry class, which really should have nothing to do with civil engineering, and ended up changing majors and kind of just stumbling in to the next one. And then kind of accidentally moving from job to job and career to career for several years. And that's okay. I think it's really good, especially in our younger years, to be curious, to explore, to try different things. The problem is what I observed in as I got into consulting and I was started working with a lot of leaders from big companies. I really got lucky. I got an opportunity to travel around the world running workshops on strategy, finance, leadership, things like that. And I learned a lot about what great leadership and strategy looks like. And I also observed a lot of people really kind of drifting through their careers, operating in reaction mode, waiting for someone else to tell them what to do or where to go, and not really being very intentional about their career and what they wanted to do. And so I kind of put that away in the back of my head. And as I started really going through my own personal development journey and doing a lot of self reflection, starting back in 2016, I was 36 years old. And I realized through lots of reading and listening to podcasts like this and self reflection that I was really drawn towards entrepreneurship. I wanted to build a business around my skills. And as I was going through that, I realized, I think I've developed a little bit of a framework I can use to help other people figure out what they want to do, where they want to go in their careers. And I realized that, in talking to clients, not everybody wants to be an entrepreneur. Most people are not cut out for that, don't want to deal with all the ups and downs and the risk and all that sort of stuff. But I think everybody does want to feel happy and fulfilled in their careers. And that's what I wanted to help people with when I published my book, Own Your Career, Own Your Life. So it's not bad that people stumble into things. I mean, we generally start careers because our parents recommended it, someone else recommended it. It just happened to be the only thing available. But over time, I think we owe it to ourselves to do more learning, more self-reflection, and start to really think about, okay, what are my strengths? What are my weaknesses? What are the things I really love doing? And what do I want to build a career around and move towards in, we'll say, my 30s and my 40s and my older years, so that I can eventually build a career that I truly do love and takes advantage of my skills.
Yeah. I mean, I remember my father was like, "Do you want to be a lawyer or a doctor?" Like those are those are good options. And I think
Right.
the bronze medal was a major in finance is what what I ended up
Mm.
doing. So your book isn't it's not really a call to entrepreneurship necessarily, but it's definitely a call to like, taking more charge of like what you actually want to do and getting clear on that. And so I was wondering, do companies ever feel like, is this guy gonna like empower my employees to like go it on their own or like totally change their careers or do
Yeah.
things like that?
That was a question that came up early on and has come up from time to time. Primarily, I've worked with a lot of companies that have asked me to speak to their entire employee populations about owning their careers. And most of the time, they're not very worried about that. And I think for two reasons. Number one, like I said, most people I come across don't have an interest in really being an entrepreneur. I think a lot of people dream of more freedom and autonomy, but there's a lot of trade-offs to that. There's a lot of responsibility and risk that comes with that. And the other thing is that, and a lot of people love the kind of the stability and the collaboration they get from working for a big company, and I miss some of those benefits as well. But the other thing is that my message is not about becoming an entrepreneur. It's about figuring out what you love doing and really just taking ownership and being more intentional about what you want to do and where you want to go. And the challenge I see in a lot of places, especially in a lot of bigger companies, is that people start to feel a little bit complacent. They feel like they're not sure where they're going in their careers. Maybe they're a little bit frustrated. And instead of talking to their manager, they're going on LinkedIn or they're taking a call from a recruiter, and now they're leaving the company to go do something else. And they haven't really solved the issue of being more intentional with what they want to do. And what my theory in that is that most managers, not all, I've had some really bad managers in my career, but most managers want to be helpful, want to help their people succeed. They just don't know what to do, or they're busy and they haven't had the conversation. So if you're taking ownership of your career, that means you're going to be more proactive in figuring out what you want to do, maybe reaching out and talking to your manager and saying, hey, I'm enjoying the work we're doing now as a financial analyst, but I'd love to figure out how I can become a director one day. What does that path look like? And then they can start to give you ideas and feedback. Or, it's been a great run in finance, but I actually really want to try marketing or getting into HR because I love people. And oftentimes, if you work for a big company that has 5, 10, 20,000 employees, that means tons of different roles that you could explore, and the company could keep you and your skills and your knowledge without having you leave. So those are the big advantages that come to companies. As far as employees are concerned, I don't think anybody owes anybody anything. I don't think you need necessarily remain loyal to a company if they are providing great benefits to you. Hopefully you can build a career inside that company. But I think it's more important to get clear on what you want to do, where you want to go, and then figure out what those options are. And if it doesn't work out in the company that you're in, then maybe you need to explore doing something else.
Yeah. So the book is kind of broken up into three sections, right? Own your career, own your future, and own your life.
Yep.
So when it comes to owning your career, I think a lot of people aren't sure what they want to do. And you talk a lot about setting a vision and like really
Mm.
understanding that. What advice do you have for people as far as how to, I feel like figuring out your purpose is this really lofty idea and concept that gets thrown around a lot, but people do feel like, what, I'm not sure what I really want to do. So how do you help people figure that out?
Well, there's no easy answer to that question, but one thing I'll say is that there's a phrase that's gone around for many years. People think you're supposed to follow your passion, and I think the trouble with that is you may not know what your passion is, or your passion may not pay very much. If your passion is right is music or painting, you may not make very much,
Podcasting.
or podcasting. Right, exactly. There's, I've been podcasting since 2018. I think I heard a stat the other day. There's like 600,000 podcasts that come out weekly, but only the top like 1% actually make, a living from their podcast. So
Right, right.
it might be your passion, it might be a great hobby, but it's not something necessarily going to pay the bills. You got to think about the trade-offs. I'm a bigger fan of following your curiosity. So what are the things you're curious about that you want to learn about? Thinking about what are the things that you're good at? What are you curious about? What's valuable in the marketplace? So again, you might be passionate about one thing, but something else might be valuable. AI is a really hot topic right now. So what are you curious about in that space? Because there's a lot of opportunities that are being created by new technologies. Finance is changing all the time. There's some things that you might be curious about exploring. And I think it's okay to say, you know what, I'm interested in finance. I'm going to go try this career for a couple of years. And if it doesn't work out, then I'll do something else. The other thing you can do is do informational interviews. So I love networking and talking to people about the careers that they're in and finding out, what's interesting. When I was graduating with my MBA back in 2008, it's quite some time ago. I wasn't sure still what I wanted to do, and so I reached out to about 30 different alumni in different types of jobs in finance and marketing, HR, different things, and just asked them if I could have a 20-minute conversation to find out more about what they do, how they do it, what they like about it, what they don't like about it. And I thought maybe half of them might reply, but there's a stronger connection when someone's gone to the same school as you. And
Totally.
I think it was like a 90% response rate. And I had all these calls with people. And I learned so much about careers and finance, marketing, all that stuff. That can really help. The other thing you can do is a lot of self reflection, which is missing for a lot of people, just taking time to think about the things that you enjoy doing, you don't enjoy doing. And then the last thing is to get feedback from people you've worked with or your friends that say they see you light up when you're working on something and how much you hate working on something else. And they might be able to provide an outside perspective about the type of career that maybe you could pursue. And then the last thing I would say is that there's always trade-offs in these things. Your father said he wanted you to maybe become a doctor or a lawyer. A lot of people do that not because they're passionate about it, but because the money is there. That's totally okay too. You got to do what's right for you.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting when we're talking about like a working parent, because on the one hand, stability is really important to a lot of parents, financial stability, of course, but on the other hand, a lot of people go into entrepreneurship or into career changes after they have kids because of the freedom or the autonomy or the flexibility that they're craving. So, do you tailor your conversations or your messaging at all around owning your career when it comes to someone that's a parent as well?
Well, I think not. I've never spoken to an audience that's primarily only parents or not parents. But what I will say is, I think it's important to think about your life situation and to adapt your ambitions toward that. Right. So early in my career, I thought, oh, I want to be a CEO of a company one day. Right. And then as I've started to live more life, not only become a parent, but I've realized how much I love to travel and ride my bike and do fun things. I think, you know what? I actually really just want a job or a business that supports my lifestyle, but doesn't require a ton of work. And the reality is that, the reality is if you want to be a CEO of a big company or a C suite of a big company one day, that's great. You're probably going to have to work 60, 70, maybe 80 hours a week for a long
Yeah.
time. And there's
Yeah.
nothing wrong with that, but you're probably going to miss some soccer games, right? You're
Right.
probably going to miss some of your kids' activities. And so I think it's fine to say, hey, my goal is to one day be CEO of a company. And it's also fine to say, I don't care about promotions or making the most money. I just want to make a decent living and have dinner with my family every night and never miss a soccer game. And I think that's fantastic too. The point is, owning your career is about doing what's right for you, not what's right for other people. And then just being honest about the trade offs and saying, yeah, I don't make as much money as my friend who is the VP and is flying all over the country, and that sounds exciting. But that friend either doesn't have kids or they miss half their soccer games, and I'm at all of mine. And I'm very ambitious personally. I want to build a bigger business and make more money, but I don't ever want to do that at the cost of not being there for my kids. And so I consider that trade off all the time in what I do. The good news, I think, for all of us is that many opportunities have been created to kind of try to do both post COVID, with so many jobs being done virtually, remotely. In some ways, people might be working more, but at least they're there. And I do a lot more of the workshops and speaking I do virtually versus, in person. And so I'm not traveling nearly as much as I was before COVID. And that became a real silver lining because I'm home with my kids most of the time.
Yeah, COVID really did the work for us in a lot of ways, right?
Yeah. It really accelerated the way where things kind of were going anyway. But it changed the way a lot of people work. And I think it's created a big advantage for a lot of working parents to either eliminate a commute or be around or maybe more accessible to pick up their kids from schools. Now, companies are changing all the time. Everybody's
Yeah,
job and role is different, but I do think it created a lot of new opportunities for us.
sure. Okay, so owning your future, things like constantly learning, networking, and growing your brand. I think growing a personal brand is probably more important than ever, and certainly a really hot topic right now. You've done a great job of that, so we'd love to hear your thoughts on that for people that want to do more of it.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. And so, yeah, the middle section of the book is all about setting yourself up for future success. I believe there are three things we can always be doing to prepare for the future. One is investing in continuous learning, like you mentioned. And continuous learning is not just about your particular role or the type of work you do. It can be about all kinds of things. For instance, I usually read a parenting book every now and then because it's something I always want to get better at, along with business and everything else. The second thing is building your network. We talked about networking and learning from others. And the third thing is building your personal brand. And your personal brand is essentially your reputation. It's what people think about you, what they say about you, even when you're not in the room. And I think we all have reputations. We all have a brand, whether we are doing anything about it or not. And so I think we might as well be intentional with building our personal brand. Now, it doesn't mean being fake. I'm a big fan of authenticity, but I also am a big fan of being intentional about building your personal brand. Now, what does that look like? It really means thinking about how you're showing up, what you want to be known for. As an exercise I often have people go through is just think about, hey, what are the things that you want to be known for? And then once you know what that is, whether it's responsibility, hard work, getting things done, kindness, generosity, fun, whatever it is, then you can ask yourself on a regular basis, am I showing up in alignment with that personal brand? And the two main ways you're building your brand are, one, how are you interacting with people you're working with in the office or virtually? And then number two is, how are you showing up online, on social media, other places where you interact with people? And the corporate or professional space, that primary place is going to be LinkedIn. So are you on LinkedIn? Are you sharing any content? Are you commenting or connecting with other people? Are you building relationships? Are you using it like a community? Or are you just using it like a job board? And every interaction you have with other people, the content you create, places you comment, that has the potential to build your personal brand, which has the potential to help you grow your career later on in life.
Mm-hmm. I think a lot of people struggle with putting themselves out there, content creation. Maybe they're worried about what people will say about them, and I think that they have this desire to be more visible, but also this concern of what either random people or people they know will think of them.
Right.
How do you overcome that? Did you ever struggle with that?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. When I started creating content, really going back to probably 2016, I struggle with that all the time. And I still do. Sometimes I write something, have an idea for something. I'm like, I'm not going to put that out there. Look, yeah, fear holds a lot of people back from doing things like that. The biggest fears are fear of failure, fear of rejection, and fear of judgment. In this case, fear of judgment is a big one. And the way I come back, look at that is that depending on what you're trying to put out there, hopefully it's something that might be valuable or helpful for others. You are now holding yourself back from sharing something that could be helpful to others because you're afraid that one or two people might judge you for it. And in the reality, it's pretty unlikely that someone is really going to judge you harshly for sharing something, unless it's something really outlandish or crazy, right? And if they do, that's kind of more on them. I mean, the stuff that you share is never going to be for everyone. But when you do share it, you have an opportunity to help other people. You also have an opportunity to help yourself. And so I think kind of about the bigger picture, the long-term benefits. what are the worst things that can happen, the true downside? Am I holding myself back because of limiting beliefs where I just don't think I'm good enough, but other people tell me I am? Is the fear, really as bad as I think it could be? And then the other thing I come to when I'm looking at maybe some of these scary decisions, because I've done a lot to overcome fear over the years as well, is to connect with my future self and ask, is this something that I want to look back on and say, oh, I'm really glad I put stuff out there, or I'm glad I let fear hold me back? Because if you look at, one of the famous book, the top five most biggest regrets of the dying by Bronnie Ware, I think it was, the number one regret, she said, of most people on their deathbed is, I regret that I did not live a life true to myself. And so I would encourage everybody to think about, what is that life that's true to you? And that life may not include, putting content online. Maybe that's not something we care that much about. But if you do have ideas that you think you want to share, you do think you could benefit from building your brand more, you do think you can help other people, I would encourage you to just try it, start putting some stuff out there and see what happens. Most likely, probably nothing, because people aren't really paying as much attention to you as you think they are.
Yeah.
But see what the benefits are, and if any of the downsides really happen, and then think about how you truly want to live your life and what you want to be proud of later on.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. As I've dabbled in the content creation world, people don't really give a shit, right? Like that's really the kind. It's like you're so nervous about what they're gonna think, and
Mhm.
they might briefly think something about it, but they got their own stuff going on, and so no one really cares what you're doing.
Yeah. No, I mean, you could go too far, right? We just coming out of a major election cycle. There was a lot of political stuff online. I saw some people that I know post some things I didn't agree with. And I was just thinking about that recently, unfollowed some people because I'm just like, I don't want to see this anymore. So there's a risk in that, but I would say that's kind of I don't know, a third rail you want to stay away from, right? Especially if we're talking about LinkedIn, you're going to keep it more professional. I think personal stuff on LinkedIn is great too, but obviously you're going to stay away from politics or like highly controversial stuff. The other thing I was going to say too about like whether you should push the button or not, right? Whether you should post something or not. We're all parents here, so ask yourself, what would you tell your kid or your best friend to do? Would you encourage them to
Mhm.
do it? And if the answer is yes, then are you living by example, right? Are you actually setting a good example for your kids in pushing past your fears and doing the things that you want? And I think about that all the time as well.
That's a good point as well. Okay, so owning your life. One of the things you talk about is having a growth mindset. This is a concept that I always found really interesting, and I was thinking I had this conversation about how that applies to parenting and family challenges, right? I think a lot of people can feel like they don't know what they're doing or they're not doing a good job, and so I'm curious to hear your thoughts on how you can apply a growth mindset to being a better parent.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So the third section of the book is all about owning your life. It's not just about career, but are you being intentional with the way you're living your life as well? Are you paying attention to your health, to relationships, all that sort of stuff? And I'm really big on growth mindset. Now, this comes from a book called Mindset, The New Psychology of Success by Dr. Carol Dweck from Stanford. And when I read that book in 2016, it absolutely changed my life because I realized, first, she posits in the book that most people operate with one of two mindsets, either a fixed mindset, which means that you believe that everything in life is fixed. Either you're smart or you're not, you're creative or you're not, you're good at something or you're not. And what she said is most people with a fixed mindset will shy away from challenging situations because they're so afraid of failure. They want to make sure that they're succeeding in the things that they're doing. And that with a growth mindset, we believe that we can always learn, we can always grow, we can always get better. And through her studies, she said people with a growth mindset tend to gravitate towards more challenging situations because they say, hey, I might not get everything right, but that's a great opportunity to learn. And I think that we would all say we want our kids to gravitate towards more of those challenging situations, to try hard things and to learn. But what happens is we oftentimes parents unknowingly push their kids towards more of the easy situations to avoid failure. And I'll talk about that in a moment. But I grew up with a very fixed mindset and realized that was causing me to shy away from a lot of things because I was so afraid of failing. And when I read that book, kind of a light bulb went off and I made a big switch and I've committed to trying hard things, scary things, failing a lot, which has allowed me to really try a lot of stuff. I published a book, I've hosted conferences, I've launched podcasts, I've started a business, I've moved to another continent, I've done all kinds of crazy stuff. And I believe I've been able to do it because I've adopted more of the growth mindset. Now, I've been really passionate since then about trying to push that with my kids as well. And I heard something really important. It was a podcast interview I heard many years ago between, I think it was Larry Yach and Larry Hagner on a great podcast called The Dead Edge. about instilling a growth mindset in our kids. And the thing they talked about was praising effort over results. So this is a really easy and big one to remember for parents, praising effort over results. So we gravitate towards praising results. Oh, you got A's on your report card. Great job. Oh, you won the game. That's great. What that does is encourage kids to strive for the results. And if they don't get the results, then think, well, maybe it's not really worth putting in the effort, right? Or to be upset. And I'm competitive too. I want to win the game, but I want to encourage my kids all the time to know that it's really more about working hard, putting in the effort, trying hard things. If they take a test and it's too easy, then I'm not excited they got an A. I'm like, that was too easy for you. You need a harder test, right? And I want to encourage them to operate with more of a growth mindset and to try hard things. And one of the hardest things for us as parents is to also let our kids fail and learn from those things on their own. And I struggle with that as much as anybody else. But I used to take my kids to the playground all the time, and I would just always see, as I had this in my mind, thinking about seeing the other parents go, careful, careful. No, don't do that. You might fall. And like always protecting their kids. And it's understandable. We want to protect our kids. But I always think if we protect them too much, they're never going to have that opportunity to learn from their own mistakes and learn from the small ones now to develop the mindset to handle the big ones later. So I almost kind of want to set them free within reason. I yell at them if they cross the street without looking both ways. But but at the playground, like, go for it. If fall, that's all right. This is how we learn, because I want them to be able to handle that stuff later on.
Yeah, it's tricky, right? Because you do need to have some level of adversity to build resilience and just character, really. But it's hard to fabricate it, right? So it's like you don't want to have too much adversity because it could cause trauma. So it's like, how do you dial it? How do you uh, you know, create adversity for your kid
Mhm.
that's just enough to strengthen them and not enough to break them?
And how do you know when to jump in, right? If they're dealing with difficulty at school, that's always one of the biggest ones, a tough teacher or a bully or something like that. How to know when to let them handle it on their own versus when to jump in and help them. I think that's one of the hardest decisions in parenting. And I don't think there's ever an easy answer. It's just one that we have to continue to think about and learn from all the time.
Yeah, I do love the idea of the growth mindset and encouraging effort, because I for sure that's not what happened to me. I was just told, you're smart, good job whenever you got an A, and I've read before, like, instead of saying, even if they get an A, it's like you must have worked really hard on it, not like you're so smart.
Yeah, I would. My kids would get annoyed because I would never tell them they were smart. I would tell my family not to tell them that they're smart. They're like, my daughter loves to
I'm
say,
saying that now. I'm wondering how it's gonna go over. Yeah,
it's so funny. Yeah, my daughter loves to say how smart she is, and I'm like, she does it just to annoy me,
that's funny.
because she knows now, like, that I'm so big on this idea. But you've got an 18-month-old, right? This is an age where, like, learning to walk and run and talk. There's so many opportunities to make mistakes and so many opportunities for you to celebrate mistakes versus like always correcting them and be like, oh no, you have to do it this way. And I think that goes a long way towards their approach to life.
Your kids are a little bit older. Have you seen it start to pay off that you've been trying to do it? Do you cultivate that in
Oh
them?
yeah, I think so. I mean, you never really know. Like, is this stuff working or doing anything?
Yeah,
Is it
or was it
is
just
it
built in there anyway? Right?
yeah? Is it nature versus nurture? I mean, my two
Yeah,
kids are so different, but
yeah.
I do see how they are. They're okay with challenging situations. My daughter, even though I have never really put any type of pressure in terms of grades on her and just say all I care about is you learning, she puts a lot of pressure on herself with grades. So I think sometimes it's just natural that they come out that way, and then other
Yeah.
times they may be geared towards something else.
What made you choose Barcelona, by the way? We haven't talked about why you're in Barcelona.
Yeah. So speaking of putting our kids in challenging situations, I chose Barcelona because I wanted to live outside the U.S. I wanted to live in Europe. My wife felt the same, and we were looking at Portugal, but really we had friends. We had friends there, and then we had friends that had moved to Barcelona and just kept telling us how great it was. And we came to visit, and we just fell in love with it. And one of the reasons we fell in love with it was because we saw kids everywhere. It seemed like such a family friendly city. And so we took the leap. We moved in August 2023, and our kids were on board. And one of the reasons we did it when our kids were 9 and 7, thinking they're old enough to understand everything, but they're young enough that we can still move them, because I feel like teenagers are really, really hard to move, right? Once you get set with your friends. And there's been challenges that have come with it. It's been a pretty cool experience. The first year we had them in an international school that was in English, and that was a great experience for them. We all made a lot of friends. And then this year we made the decision to move them to local schools, which are in the local language, primarily Catalan, which is the local language, and Spanish is the second language. And it's been really, really hard because they don't speak those languages yet, but they are
At
learning
all.
at all. But they're,
Wow.
well, they had a little bit of Spanish,
Yeah, yeah.
but they're learning every day, just like we are. And then, they've had a hard time. And I tell my kids, especially my daughter, who's had a harder time, that like, hey, I never went through this experience. Like, I put you in a harder situation than I've ever been in.
Yeah.
And I recognize what you're going through. And I really admire that you're going through it, even though you didn't have a choice. Although she was kind of on board, and, we talked
Yeah.
about it beforehand.
So the teacher's
And
just speaking in Catalan.
the teacher is teaching in Catalan. My daughter goes to a trilingual school, so it's 1/3 Catalan, 1/3 Spanish, and 1/3 English. And then they start French in 5th grade as well. So there's a lot of stuff going on. My son goes to a Catalan school teaching in Catalan, but then the kids play in Spanish on the playground. So it's crazy, but they are learning a ton as a result. And again, when they're struggling, I have to wonder, like, did I make this situation too hard for them, or do I just let them, fight through it, and that they're going to be glad? Because I know, I'm a typical American who speaks one language. I'm learning Spanish. I'm going to class now as well, trying to learn again. I know it's going to pay off, and they'll be so happy when they have multiple languages later on. But it's a struggle to
Sure.
get there, right? And I think it's going
Yeah.
to be an interesting experience.
Yeah, we just don't put a premium on that in the States, unfortunately, and we're got to be one of the only countries that is mostly speaks one language.
Yeah, and you can get by fine, obviously, in English and
And
never have to go
everywhere, yeah.
anywhere. But it's mind blowing when you come to Europe and you meet people every day who speak 3 and 4 languages, and it's just like
Yep.
a normal thing. I mean, a lot of people here in Barcelona speak 3 languages because Catalan's the primary language, Spanish secondary, and then for international work they need to be able to speak English. And then we're only 2 hours away from the border with France, so a lot of people speak French as well. It's amazing.
Yeah, that's cool. All right, we're going to move into the final segment called Andy's Advice Corner. So I'm going to ask you for some advice on a few topics.
Okay.
What is your best piece of advice for working parents?
Best piece of advice for working parents is to think about your priorities and what's most important to you, and remember that there's trade-offs in everything we do. And I think that things are going to shift and change over time, right? There's a season for everything. So remember that I think in the long run, quality time with your kids, which is what they want. They say they want lots of things, but what they really want is time with us, right? That's going to be more important, right? I heard a very startling phrase. It's like a meme that goes around. I saw a couple times. It's basically like, later on in life, nobody's going to remember you working late to answer emails except for your kids, right? And so you think like, okay, I don't want to work just to work.
Yeah.
But there are times when, you're on an important project, whatever it is, like you need to get work done. And so I think about those things all the time. And I struggle, especially now being in Barcelona. I'm 6 to 9 hours ahead of the US. I still work primarily with a lot of people in the US. I do calls later in the day. So there are times at, 7 p.m., my kids come to me and say, hey, can we do this thing? And I'm like, oh, I got to get this work done. And so I just have to stop and think all the time about what's most important in this situation. Am I working just to work, or do I really got to get this thing done? Or can I just put this aside and go play with my kids, because I'm never going to regret spending time with them, and I'll have more time to work later. So it's not clear advice, but I think in terms of trade-offs, get clear on your priorities, and just evaluate every moment and wonder, do I need to be working as much as I do if I could be spending time with my kids? Because I probably won't regret that later.
What advice do you have for self-care?
I think self-care is so, so important. I think it's underrated, and it's underappreciated by parents. I know we already have a lot going on. We've got work. We've got to take care of our kids. But there's a lot out there that they say, you can't pour from an empty cup. You put your oxygen mask on first. I think that the more you take care of your own self and your own health, it gives you more energy to take care of your kids, to take care of other people. And plus, remember, kids watch what you do more than they listen to what you say, right? Your whole entire life. And so if they see you taking care of yourself, they realize the priority. So my kids know, for the most part, that I go to the gym most days. I'm big into cycling, so I ride my bike a lot. They know I meditate every morning. They know I like reading and journaling. And they, if I try to get them engaged in those things, they don't necessarily do it, but they know that, eating vegetables, that doing all these things are important to me. And I can only hope that it sinks in and it becomes something important to them. And so I think, there's two levels there. There's one, like take care of yourself so you can take care of other people. And two, you're modeling what you want your kids to do later on.
What advice do you have for somebody that wants to write a book?
For someone that wants to write a book, I would say, hey, get really clear on why you want to write a book. What do you want it to do for yourself, for you or your business? And what do you want it to do for other people? What is that book going to help other people with? If it's nonfiction, if it's fiction, that's awesome too. But like, what's the real reason behind it? What's the purpose? I think writing a book is really hard. And when you do hard things, it's really helpful to get clear on the purpose, the why behind it. And then find a resource that can help kind of guide you through the process, whether you hire an actual coach or, you read a book on the process or just read a blog on how to get it done. And then the other thing that has been really helpful for me is just to write down an outline as if you were going to give a talk, if you haven't, on the subject. And then you can start writing from that outline and just try to make it a habit to write on a regular basis and see what you come up with.
What is the best advice you ever received?
Best advice I've ever received. I don't know. I've received so much great advice, but something that I think really guides me these days, that's been really helpful, comes from Stoic wisdom. I read a book every day called The Daily Stoic by Ryan Holiday. That's just kind of a quote, an explanation of like some Stoic philosophy.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of his.
Okay, cool. Yeah. And I think it's just that guiding principle that you can't really change all the events and things that are happening around you. There's so much happening in the world that's outside of our control. The only thing that's really in our control is our reasoned choice and the way we respond and react to these events. And so that wasn't like direct advice, but it's something that I think about a lot that's really, I think, helped me operate through life, get curious about my own emotions and reactions to things, and allowed me to kind of temper myself and to handle things better. And I like to think set a better example for my kids because I know they're watching how I handle difficult situations as well.
Yeah, no, I love that. I mean, and I think that's the key, right? That's all you can control.
Yeah, that's it. Can't control other people.
Other than that, what advice would you give to your former self?
I think, looking back to my younger self, I would probably say, look, I think the number one skill for anybody in any profession is curiosity, and to try to always lead with curiosity and empathy, and just get as curious as you can and try as many things as you can, because failure is just a learning opportunity. Really, there's no failure. There's only learning and growth in life. And so don't worry about that stuff. Just worry about learning new things, because and talking to lots of people, because that's going to lead to you figuring out what you really want to do, lead to you trying things that, eventually will work out well for you, and hopefully achieving more in your career and your life.
All right, last question. By the time this episode comes out, my daughter will probably be 20 months old. So what advice do you have for me as a father of a 20-month-old daughter?
21-month-old daughter. I would say, a lot of people would say, kind of cliche, like, hey, make sure you live in the moment and enjoy as much of it as you can. It goes by
get that
fast.
a lot, yeah.
Yeah, all those things are true. I'm going to say read to her a lot, because this is a good bonding experience, and it also helps her develop vocabulary faster in hearing you read. And so I always read with my kids until, well, even now, my 10-year-old daughter, I still read with her. We've been reading the Harry Potter series, and we are about 80% of the way through the 7th and final book, almost there. So don't anybody spoil it for me.
Wow.
Yeah.
I mean, it's been a long time. I think, you better hurry up before spoilers come out.
I know it has, but we've kind of been doing it off and on together over the last, I think, 2 years, because they're pretty long books. But it's been a great experience reading those things together. And I've been reading to her since she was born. I used to read the New York Times to her when she was a baby, just to like read stuff,
So at that age, do you read to her, or are you just both reading together?
I would read to her, or if I'm reading the New York Times, I'm just reading.
No, I mean, I'm sorry. Like at this age, with your daughter with Harry Potter, are you reading it to her now, or?
I am reading it to her. Yeah.
Oh.
I mean, she certainly could read it on her own, but no, she sits next to me and just kind of cuddles next to me on the couch, and I read it to her, and she sits and listens. So
that's
really
nice. Awesome. Well, this has been a great conversation, Andy. Where can people go to connect with you or learn more about you? Anything that you'd like to share or promote?
Everything's on my website, andystorch.com, ANDYSTORCH. And I actually have some bonus resources on there. So the book is called Own Your Career, Own Your Life, which is available on Amazon. But if you want to just get a kind of a free summary of the book, you can go to andystorch.com/bonus. And there's some bonus resources. Just put your email in and you can download some bonus resources. On the website as well, I think as information on my book, on the podcast, all the work I do, as well as a cancer guide for anybody that happens to be going through that unfortunate experience as well.
Awesome. Well, I will link to all that in the show notes. Andy Storch, ladies and gentlemen. Andy, thank you so much.
Thank you, Anthony.